Welcome back to our channel, and today we're going to be looking at condition control iteration. So we're going to be looking at loops that basically run with conditions. It's a mixture of for loops and selection statements if you want to look at it like that. So what is condition control iteration? So condition control iteration basically is the repeat of a particular section of code until a condition is met or not met, depending on the way you've written it. There's two main types of condition control iteration that you need to be aware of. We've got while loops, so this uses the statement while and end while, and then we've got repeat loops, which uses the statement repeat and until. So those are the two loops you need to really be aware of. Today we're going to be looking at while loops specifically to give you an idea of how a condition controlled iteration based program can run. So sometimes we don't know how long we're going to be running our loop for. We might need that piece of code to run repeatedly until something happens in order for it to stop. This is where the while loop differs from the for loop. The for loop is count controlled. So we've got a count and we know exactly how many times you want to cycle through the loop. But in the case of condition controlled loops, we let the loop run on based off a condition. And this tends to be a Boolean condition, checking if something is true or false. So we're checking if a count or a variable might be less than, more than a particular number. Okay, and if it's true, the loop will carry on. Otherwise, the loop eventually stops. And this is a continuous cycle, and it repeats the code inside until it stops. So now let's take a look at a while loop and its pseudocode. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a very simple example of a while loop we've written down in pseudocode. Now, the first line, we have the statement while. While is a keyword to indicate to the program that we're running a condition control loop. And our condition is we're checking if counter is less than 6. The difference between the while loop and the for loop will say for counter is 1 to 5. For instance, we're specifying exactly how many cycles it's going to go through. This particular example is just a condition. So depending on the point that our counter starts from, it could run as many times possible, really, considering if we're starting from a negative number. So now after we've got the initialization of the loop, we've got our indented code, which is just simply going to output the counter. Then this time around, we do our increment inside the loop. This is where it's slightly different to the for loop again. So we've got counter plus 1. Then we go back up, we check we increment the counter, we go back up, we check the condition, and if that's the case, we run it again. This continually repeats itself until eventually the condition isn't met. We go to the final line, which is end while, and now we terminate the loop. Okay, so that's just a brief example of a while loop. We will be looking at some more practical examples later on in the lesson. So we need to understand why sometimes we'll use a while loop beyond the fact that we just need to repeat our piece of code. So some practical examples of a while loop being used are interfaces. Sometimes when we're interacting with interfaces, they're just sitting there waiting for a response from the user. So it could be clicking a button, for example, or anything similar to that. The fact that we use a while loop allows us to have the interaction between the program and the outside world. We can also still keep count of how many times the loops run. We just need to increment a variable inside the loop, just as we showed you in the previous slide. So now let's look at some examples of while loops being run in Python. So we're now going to be looking at some examples of a while loop and how they work. So we've got a very simple example here using some of the knowledge we looked at earlier on. It's a very similar program to our pseudocode. So we've got a counter. I've initialized it at 0. We've got the while loop with the while condition with the while statement, counter less than 3, and then we've got a print statement saying print. This is the counter of iteration. Okay, this is the counter of iteration. This is the lines of iteration. That makes more sense. So let's run this now and see if it works. Now, look at that. This loop is not stopping and it's going on repeatedly. I have to terminate this. So here we go. Let's terminate it. Now, I'm thinking to myself, why is this loop not incrementing? Incrementing. What does that word remind me of? Plus in 1. There you go. So what we got to do now is we got to do counter is equal to counter plus 1. Okay. Now we've run it. Let's see if it works. There we go. 0 plus 1 plus 2. So we've got a 3 times our lines have iterated. And this is a very simple while loop program here. So if we look again, it is imperative that we have this incrementation within the loop. Otherwise, we get a headache like we did earlier on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and write out another piece of code, which is using while loops. So let's now delete this program, and I want to create a new program which is going to have total is equal to 0. And let's say number is equal to 1. Now I want a program to repeatedly add numbers until I prompt the number 0 to the program, and then ends the loop. So I'm going to write while num is greater than 0, colon. And in here, we're going to ask the user to enter their number. So we'll do int input, open bracket, what is the number you like to add. Now you can see I'm getting an error here. Why? Because I've decided to go on to the next line. So, and it's confused the computer. There you go. So that's better. Let's stretch this out a little bit just to make it look neater. So then I'm going to do total is equal to total plus num. There we go. And outside the loop, I'm going to print the total of your program is comma total. So if just to summarize this before I run it, hopefully we get no errors this time. We've got a while loop. Okay, this while loop is going to continually run until while the number is greater than 0. We started off by incrementing the value of total as 0. We've given the number value. We've given num, the value of 1, and then when we get into the loop, they're prompted to add or input the number they'd like to add. This is added onto the total variable in the form of total plus num, and then this carries on incrementing until we're done. So let's give it a go. What's the number you'd like to add? I'll say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So as you can see, this program is not ending. 2, 3, 4, 5. Press 5 again. Now I'm going to press 0. So it should end, and it should tell me what the total is. So the total of your program is 64. So that's an example of a while loop. Very easy, very simple for you to understand. Now, this can have more complexity the more things you put into it. As we've gone through the different constructs now, we can start to combine these constructs, and I'll be posting some videos in the same series where we're looking at more complicated programs, and we're going to be answering, completing tasks, should I say, for programming to allow you to visually see what more complex programs look like. But I hope today's lessons helped you to understand the concept of a condition-controlled loop or a while loop. Thank you for taking your time to watch this video. At the next lesson. Please like very much.